say it again, and as many times as these bills come before us regarding the ability for any level of government to do their job well and responsibly, it's an important bill. The direct impact of this bill on the Halifax Regional Municipality and the ability for it to enhance their governing responsibility and their abilities to respond to their residents is what's before us. And certainly I've supported the intention to request from this House a separate charter for HRM when I was on Council, and I stand before you today in support of it again, as does our caucus. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased, in fact, to be now a member of this House, to be able to see this move along in the process that it is and become a reality for HRM. I support this, and we support this for a number of reasons, Mr. Speaker, but primarily one of the most important aspects is that the MGA that exists now, the primary function of it recognizes the functionality of the municipality. It recognizes the ability for the municipal units to be good governance and provide the services and facilities and other things as such that they are mandated to do. It offers the ability through the tools that are in the MGA to maintain safe, viable communities, Mr. Speaker, of which we all represent every day the concerns that our constituents bring forward to us. But it also gives them broad authority to do the job that they do within their councils. But, Mr. Speaker, and this legislation, this request from HRM for the change, it recognizes the unique challenges that this municipality faces, the challenges of being the economic centre of Atlantic Canada, certainly 60% of the economic activity in this province, of which we're mandated to govern, and 40% of the population in Nova Scotia. Those are significant numbers. With that comes significant challenges, significant fiscal restraints, significant issues, and different issues than perhaps some of the other municipalities across the province face. So this legislation is in recognition of that. Factors affecting the challenges that they face are, population growth, the tremendous change that occurs here in the municipality, the higher density population that we have, the 25-year regional plan that was very thoughtfully and many a couple of years that it took to really flesh that out. Those changes, the sustaining our commercial and economic growth here in this region, in the capital region, the importance of the technology and the manufacturing industry that is here in this local area, the energy development, all of those are important parcels that this change will help them govern and be responsive to. Hence the need for an HRM charter. But this charter, when it was requested, the intention of it was to be as a reflection or a mirror image, perhaps, of the Municipal Government Act. But there was a request for some changes that allowed them to manage the challenges that they face a little more timely and more responsibly for their constituents. Efficiency in their ability to respond I think, is an important part of having successful government. I believe that this legislation has achieved that, Mr. Speaker. The goal of the legislation will allow Halifax Regional Municipality to be as successful as it can be. And I think that's one of the fundamental roles that we can play here, is to help provide the tools and the governing policies that allow them to be successful, as we would any other municipal unit across this province. Mr. Speaker, it's important to note a couple of things, though, on this legislation, that pre-amalgamation there were charters in this region, and they worked then, and they can work again, and this is, I look forward to seeing the benefits that the municipality will garner out of this change. Future charter amendments, though, it's also worth noting, future charter amendments will come back to this House. It's not just a blank sheet of paper that the municipality gets to go and write their own rules. It's not that in any way. They have to come back to this House for amendments, as they do now. The application is just specific to their region, to Halifax Regional Municipality, as opposed to the broader stroke across the province. Mr. Speaker, we do not take the information, the issues that around the debates that have happened, whether it be in law amendments or in our caucus. We do not take that lightly. They are of significant importance. With the interest of all the residents of HRM, and balancing that with the weight of the rest of the province is what we thought about when we were deliberating support for this. I was, as well as the minister had noted, thank the other parties, thank caucus for taking the time to be very thoughtful in their consideration of the issues around this bill, and all parties to achieving us to get to this point today, to be able to move this forward. I think that I'm pleased. In fact, I think it's worth noting that I'm pleased that this bill was before us. It allowed me, as a new MLA, to, so to speak, cut my teeth on a bill that I had, some more current and timely, relevant experience in. So I'm pleased to move this, to support this bill, and I look forward to hearing the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable Member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise on third reading for Bill number 181. This is a bill that we are very pleased to see come forward as members of the Liberal Party. And as a former HRM councillor, I also feel that this is a bill whose time has come. There's been a lot of debate and a lot of controversy around development in Halifax and in fact throughout the municipality, and not just the downtown. But HRM by Design has been working as a committee for some time to talk to the public, to confer with people, to try and find the compromise and the balance that's needed so that HRM can move forward. That's really what is at the crux of this bill, and that is to find a way that we can work and have some, excuse me, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we believe that this enabling legislation is very important so that development will go forward, so that the city's historic areas will be respected and identified. We believe that the status quo simply isn't good enough anymore for a city that needs to adopt, I guess, innovative and new ways to grow and to welcome others into this. Yeah. Right now we're talking the charter bill? Yeah. Oh, well. Everything you said was fine. Oh, very good. Mr. Speaker, we're talking on the charter bill right now, so I want to say that everything I've said today has been very good. However, I can take a different tact if I'm talking on the charter bill.
I'll vote for that. Okay.
It's interesting that having listened to the previous speaker, it wasn't clear to me which bill that was. But however, no, I'm sorry. Mr. Speaker, the two bills, I must say, the two bills that we've been discussing, 179 and 181, have been very intertwined, and I think that the municipal affairs critic for the NDP party would agree with me. A lot of the discussion has been intertwined, as have the many people who've come to law amendments and spoken to us. And so with that, I do apologize for speaking more on 181. But 179 is our charter bill, and Mr. Speaker, that's also part of the enabling legislation to bring us to Halifax by Design. Both of these bills we feel are very important, and both of them provide the basis for HRM to move forward. The fact that we haven't had a charter in recent years, since the amalgamation of HRM, has really proved to be a disadvantage to our municipality and to our municipal councillors. And we believe that it is right to reinstate the kind of powers they had previously as the capital of our province. And for this reason, it's very important for us to adopt it. Again, saying that, we know it's a very large bill, but the bill is consistent in all respects with the Municipal Government Act. It has simply adopted everything that applies to all other municipalities in the entire province. That's all 55 municipalities, and now taken all of those rules that are in place and redefine them as being specific to HRM. In so doing, Mr. Speaker, it's going to allow for much faster and more efficient changes when HRM has specific needs that have to be addressed. Previously, any change, big or small, has had to go through the process of UNSM vetting it, that is, getting approval from all the other municipalities in the province before a small change, small or large, could be introduced for HRM. And it's been difficult to do that at times because there are very different interests and competing interests sometimes between HRM as the largest municipality and the many others in the province that may not want to be held to some of the costs and some of the burdens that might come with changes in the Act that HRM might be seeking. There are so many examples of that, and it's much easier if we can be responsive and look at HRM as a separate entity and deal with their issues separately. Because certainly, as the previous member has said, HRM includes 40% of the population and over 50% of the economic activity of our province. And for that reason, it requires a special circumstance and attention. And Mr. Speaker, with that being said, I certainly wanted to acknowledge the many people who've spoken to us at Law Amendments and their additions and suggestions, because they were most welcome as we went forward. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I am happy to support this bill.
Thank you. The Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm just going to spend a few minutes. On the HRM Charter. I don't want it to go by without having an opportunity to speak on it. You know, there are a number of members of the House of Assembly on all sides that started out with municipal councils, and I was looking at kind of where we all came from, and we have members in the House who were on rural councils, members who were on HRM Council, Dartmouth City Council, the former warden of the municipality of Barrington. We have a member who was the former mayor of Sydney, and indeed two of the three leaders of the parties in this House came out of municipal politics, Mr. Speaker. So I think we have considerable appreciation for the work that goes on in council, the work that goes on in order to deliver services to people, and that's what the municipalities do, Mr. Speaker. I also have the distinction or the history of having gone through the mid-1990s, when the role of municipalities was in considerable flux. At that point in time, the government was bringing forward two things. They brought forward, as I'm sure the Speaker remembers, they brought forward service exchange, which was all about having a look at the jurisdictions of the provincial government and the jurisdiction of the municipalities, and trying to decide, you know, what the appropriate areas of jurisdiction and therefore the appropriate financial commitments that were going to be attendant on both levels of government. And I'm sure you remember, Mr. Speaker, that things like roads went into the jurisdiction of the municipalities, and things like community services. And I remember very well the days when we had municipal community services organization that were, it was a kind of a two-tier community services situation, where you went first on what was short-term community services, and that was the responsibility of the municipality, and then later on you would move on to the provincial community services benefits. And it was simply decided that that was not the most efficient way to use the money of government, either provincially or municipally. It just made more sense for that to be the provincial government's responsibility, and then the province carved out a whole group of areas that made more sense to be in the jurisdiction of the municipality. And shortly after, service exchange went forward, and we started to see what the ramifications, the financial ramifications, were going to be, especially in and around around metropolitan Halifax, Dartmouth, because it was going to have service exchange meant profoundly different experiences for different councils. In Dartmouth, we actually came out better off as a result of service exchange. The county, I think, came out much worse off, as I recall, as a result of that experience. The result was that the government moved forward with amalgamation, and there was always, I think, some suspicion that one of the things that led to the creation of the regional municipality of Halifax was a kind of leveling that was involved as a result of service exchange. It leveled out the kind of winners and losers among the various municipalities by creating a very large municipal unit. And the reality is that municipal unit, the regional municipality of Halifax, now represents an extremely powerful level of government that affects the lives of more than 40% of the people of the province. And in many ways, people see what happens at City Hall as being as important, if not more important, than what happens in the House of Assembly in terms of the direct effect that it's going to have on their day-to-day lives. And it's with respect to all the services, whether it's policing or fire or snow removal or recreation, all of those are now greatly bound up in the responsibilities of the regional municipality of Halifax. So I think, therefore, that given the importance that we have placed on the regional municipality of Halifax, that it's only right, as my colleague pointed out, and as the member of the Liberal Party pointed out, there were charters prior to the establishment of the regional municipality of Halifax. The city of Dartmouth had a charter, Halifax had a charter, and this amounts to a kind of customized legislation for the municipality of Halifax that allows it to respond very specifically to the challenges that it's going to face, not just today, but in the years to come. And I have to say that I don't see. I think there are always going to be, in a very lengthy bill, there's always going to be pieces or clauses of that are going to give you pause for concern. But generally speaking, the idea of a charter that's going to provide the framework for which the municipality is going to be run is worthy of support, Mr. Speaker. It's I certainly intend to support it. I think that we do have to be aware that there is going to be a growing competition between the regional municipality and the provincial government as their areas of jurisdiction overlap. That's a very natural thing to have happen, and I think we should look at the way to take best advantage of those dynamic tensions rather than seeing them as something that will somehow take away either from the province or from the municipality. I want to make this one last point with respect to it, though, Mr. Speaker. The whole point of putting in place this charter is to define for the regional municipality of Halifax their jurisdiction. And I want to just go on record as supporting the notion that once we empower the municipalities, allowing them the freedom to make their own decisions, and sometimes the freedom to make mistakes, is an important part of having a democratic level of government like a municipality. The members of this House are certainly not going to agree with every single decision that gets made by a municipal unit, but we do, I believe, have to respect the right of the municipalities to make those decisions, to find their own way on behalf of their citizens. And so, Mr. Speaker, with those thoughts on record, I'll take my place.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too just rise to say a few words on Bill 179, the Municipal Charter. Mr. Speaker, as every speaker has spoken before me and talked about the fact that a little over a third of the population is here in HRM, specifically that this charter is dealing with, it absolutely only makes sense that municipality has an opportunity to move business forward. The fact that under the present situation they'd have to get consensus from all the municipalities in UNSM to deal with things that specifically pertain to Halifax and moving our province forward. And one of the things that has been talked about in this House has been this is about Halifax and giving them a charter. But really, I think it's about Nova Scotia. When we give this municipality the opportunity to respond in a timely manner with decisions that are affecting its constituents in Halifax, and allow them to move the greater HRM forward, to continue to grow the economy of HRM, continue to make decisions that allow development to take place, continue to make decisions that are pertaining specifically to HRM. If they can do that in a timely fashion, then that benefits all of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. This in no way encumbers or affects the municipalities that I deal with, other than in a positive way. It allows them to see that the centre core of our province, our capital city, our capital region, has a chance to respond to the issues that affect them directly in a timely manner without having to bring forward all of the other municipalities to garner some consensus on this piece of legislation. And I think we need to bear in mind, as HRM moves forward, so does our province. We've spent a lot of time in this House over the last year and around the region talking about things being held up, things being delayed. This is about allowing the municipality of HRM to move forward. This is about allowing them to make decisions that affect directly to their constituents. I was very pleased to see, Mr. Speaker, that District Council was taking out of this piece of legislation. The last thing that we wanted to do was create a bill that really provided more government on top of people. What this piece of legislation does, in my view, is allows the municipality of HRM to respond in a timely fashion and to the issues that face directly to their constituents and not the entire province. It is our job. It is our job to manage and overlook the entire province of Nova Scotia, working with the UNSM. But when things pertain directly to HRM, those councillors, the mayor, should have the ability to be able to respond in a timely manner so that we can move this province forward and continue to grow it, Mr. Speaker. The only disappointing thing that I have in this entire piece of legislation is that we didn't pass it last spring when it was put before us. So I, on behalf of our caucus, look forward to seeing this coming for a final vote so we can pass this through and allow the UNSM, the HRM, to set their own charter and begin to set a course for their constituents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member from Halifax-Bucktown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wanted to start by amplifying a point made by our leader in his comments. He reminded us of how many of the members of the House have actually had direct experience of sitting on municipal councils. I certainly participate in that group. I was a member of the City Council for the City of Halifax pre-amalgamation. I was a member of the Halifax Regional Municipal Council the first time it was ever elected. I enjoyed that, and I mention that because when our leader spoke, he reminded us of a shared history here of involvement in the municipal level of politics. Of course, we have that, but I would go further and say that we have here, those of us who have direct experience of it, a profound respect, not just experience, but a profound respect for the municipal level of government. It's a wonderful invention, even though it's not constitutionally sanctioned or recognized. When one reads the original BNA Act and now the Constitution Act of Canada, it's clear that our country is constructed of two levels of government. In addition, now we have recognition of Aboriginal rights and perhaps self-government there. But essentially, it was the federal and provincial governments that came together to form Canada, and there is no constitutional protection that exists in Canada for the municipal level of government. Municipalities are levels of government, but they're levels of government that have been invented by provinces in order to do local matters, especially land use planning. And that is a device that is universal across Canada, and it's a very useful invention. It's a level of government for which we all have to have a lot of respect, because people work hard at that level. They engage in the details of what community ought to look like. And municipal governments are about that. They're about building community at the very local level. They engage and are expected to know the details of every street corner and every open field in their geographic district. And that's what you look to municipal councils to do, to think about in a detailed way about what are appropriate land uses within their geographic area. So I have not just participation, but respect for the municipal level of government. I have respect for it arising out of my own history as a municipal councillor. I have respect for it as a citizen who has participated at the municipal level as well. Years before I became a municipal councillor, I made representations to municipal councils, and indeed, when I found difficulties with some of the decisions that municipal councils had made, I participated in the appeal process and occasionally in litigation, either as a citizen or as a member of groups or in my private law practice. So I have that kind of engagement, which is in fact very much a part of the real democratic dynamic of what goes on at the municipal level. And finally, I have both engagement and respect for the municipal level of government because of the other occupation that I have apart from the time spent in this House, which is teaching the law of land use and land use planning at Dalhousie Law School. I've taught that for 12 years. I've taught it to law students and to students who are seeking a Master's of Planning degree. And my respect for the municipal level of government only grows as I continue to learn more about it. But to go back to that constitutional reality that I mentioned at the beginning, Mr. Speaker, the hard fact for municipalities, even though they are a legitimate level of government, is that they can't write their own rules. They have to operate within a legal context that is defined for them by the provincial government. And that's our job. Our job is to look at the legal framework within which municipalities operate. And we do it for every municipality around our province, including, of course, HRM. But that's our responsibility. Now, and that's indeed what we're engaged with here. Another way of thinking about it is to say that it's up to us to decide what is the array of legal tools, what is the array of fiscal constraints that ought to be in place with respect to municipalities. Our job is to set a framework for them that is sound. That is our function. Our function is to do that, to create the legal context. Our obligation is to give municipalities good planning tools. Now, I have to say that, of course, as has already been indicated, our caucus is going to vote in favor of Bill 179 that's in front of us now, the new HRM Charter. I've heard a suggestion of what it is that has led to this bill coming forward. Clearly, the HRM Council asked for it. And the rationale seems to be that as the largest municipal entity, if at some point in the future HRM wanted to have some changes to the legal framework that governs it, it would be a more efficient route if they could talk directly to the provincial government rather than going through amendments to the Municipal Government Act and therefore triggering the requirement for negotiation, both the political and legal requirement, I should say, for negotiation with the Union of Nova Scotia Municipalities. And therefore, and it's been suggested that there might be some particular kinds of tools that might be appropriate only for HRM. But that's a rationale. That makes sense. It's not, I don't think, an absolutely compelling rationale, but if HRM Council wants it, and if the minister is prepared to carve off a special piece of legislation for HRM, makes sense, fine with us, we'll vote for it. But, you know, one of the things that's been suggested to us is that essentially this bill just takes the Municipal Government Act and it replicates it and makes it apply to Halifax Regional Municipality. And I've been through the bill. I've been through the bill line by line, and with the assistance of the Legislative Council's office, I've been able to compare the bill that we have in front of us with the Municipal Government Act. And it's unfortunately clear, Mr. Speaker, that the Bill 179 does not, in fact, exactly replicate the Municipal Government Act. There are actually changes. And I think, given that there are changes, the minister should have identified them for us. Never mind his ill-fated excursion into district councils, which he's backed off of. That wasn't asked for by HRM Council. It was just stuck in the middle of this bill with what continues to be a murky antecedent for no clear reason. Well, you can argue the toss about district councils, but the government has backed off of them. I found a number of other changes, some of which I think, in fact, are just fine. There are additions to the list of municipal powers. I'm referring to Section 244 of the new Charter, subsections 4M and subsections 5Q. Here are two new powers given to the municipality, to HRM, without the minister having identified them. Now, one is to regulate the floor area ratio of buildings. The other is to give a more sophisticated tool for the municipality in its zoning in areas near airports. Now, you know what? I don't think either of these is controversial. In fact, come right down to it, I think they're both good ideas. Not only are they good ideas for HRM, they'd probably be good ideas for amendments to the Municipal Government Act. But there are two things I didn't hear from the minister. First, I didn't hear him identify these things, which seem to have been just tucked into the bill. And furthermore, if they're good ideas for HRM, they should probably be good ideas on this general list of powers for every other municipality in the province. But I didn't hear the minister say, we're going to take them to the UNSM and begin to talk to them about these things. Why not? I think he should. There are several other small amendments that have been tucked into this bill. I don't know if the development community knows that in Section 293, subsection 3, the definition of infrastructure charges has been amplified. It's been amplified to say that expanded solid waste management facilities can be charged up against a new development as part of the kind of development charges that are incurred by someone who builds a new subdivision. Now, I also don't think that's a bad idea. I think it's a very good idea. But I think it's not just a good idea in HRM, it's a good idea province-wide. But I wonder if the minister consulted with the development community. Now, he may have. I don't know. We don't know because he hasn't told us. And to tuck this into a bill where we're told that it's a replication of the Municipal Government Act seems to me a little peculiar. Now, there is also in Bill 179 an item that appears in two different places that really belongs in Bill 181. And this is the expanded notion of what it is that the external appearance of buildings could involve and the power to deal with them by a different planning route than prevails in the Municipal Government Act. And I want it put on the record, Mr. Speaker, that when this bill went through the Committee of the Whole House, our critic for municipal affairs attempted to amend the 2 points at which this phrase appears, but was voted down by the other two parties in that respect. And the attempt to amend those clauses was an attempt to clarify them so that we understood them more clearly and more narrowly than they might otherwise be applied. All of this should really have been in Bill 181, but they were tucked into Bill 179. If they're going to be in Bill 179, they should have been amended to accord with what it is that in fact the HRM by design process says it really has in mind. They say in their documents that what they have in mind really are materials, are the color, the pattern of the outside of buildings, the shape and size of windows, doors, and certain details. They say that they don't mean that phrase to extend to the height and bulk of the building. Well, if that's what they intend, if that's what they mean, it's very unfortunate that the two other parties refused to agree with our very sensible amendments put by our critic for municipal affairs. And I think we have to, and all listeners have to understand that that attempt to change the bill, to make it a better bill and a clearer bill, was unfortunately defeated here. Mr. Speaker, I started my remarks by saying that I, and I know all my colleagues, have great respect for the municipal level of government. I've heard the government make remarks in which they have tried to say how much they respect and support Metro. Unfortunately, the support that the government mostly gives to Metro is the kind of support that the hanged man gets from the rope. It's not what I think we should welcome. Not only do we have a premier who seems to want to be the mayor as well, but it's been easy to think of ways. It's been easy to think of ways in which the government might in fact have really done something for Metro. Now, it's very good of the government to respond to the request from HRM Council to ask for a municipal charter. But you know what? I don't think it actually does a lot for the political heft of Metro to have this charter. It's a fine thing. Let's vote for the charter. We'll have it. But if the Premier and his party really respect Metro, I suggested at second reading that they should think about ways to find a more proportional representation in this House that would give 2 more seats to Metro, which in fact, if we were going closer to one person, one vote in this province, indeed, that's exactly what the proportions would look like. We have respect for Metro, and when we've spoken up in favor of it,
Order, please.
that's one of the things that would emerge.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member has the floor. The honourable member from Halifax, Buckland.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And in fact, if the government were seriously interested in having a look at how municipal government is carried on in this province, there are probably quite a number of real changes, useful changes to the Municipal Government Act and presumably Bill 179, the new charter, could in fact have incorporated into it, but the government didn't do that. They didn't take advantage of the opportunity of rethinking this bill to have a public consultation and to think about ways in which this bill could be improved. And I want to give the government some examples of ways in which the planning process and municipal government could easily have been improved. Now, there are problems as they exist right now in the Municipal Government Act. I was present when the original piece of legislation went through this House in 1998, and I have to tell you that one of the key features of that Act is the Schedule B provisions that list provincial policies that municipalities are asked to write their own planning policies in accord with. Now, those Schedule B policies need serious rewriting. Many of them are weak, and they should certainly be expanded in order to emphasize the sustainability mission of municipal government. But that's a missed opportunity. I'm not going to try to lay out the details of changes that are needed. What I'm flagging for the government is the fact that Schedule B should be looked at because the province's obligation is to provide a context for municipalities as they do their work. And Schedule B is one of the main instruments of that context, and though that Schedule B needs work. Non-conforming use rights. Non-conforming use rights are provisions in the Municipal Government Act and now in the new charter that try to balance the rights of private owners with the interests of a developing municipality as it moves ahead and makes changes. And those are sections that probably need some work. In HRM, we have a particular taxation difficulty. It has to do with supplementary education. And I have to say that's something that the government should probably work on. And let me flag one more for the government, Mr. Speaker, and that has to do with the rights of tenants. The rights of tenants are not recognized explicitly in this legislation. Furthermore, when we get to talk about the companion piece, or one of the companion pieces of Bill 179, we will find ways in which the rights of tenants are compromised. But the point is that the rights of tenants need protection, and this would have been a good opportunity for the government to engage in that, but they did not. Finally, let me remind the government of something that emerged very strongly in the comments of the public who came to Law Amendments Committee. Quite a number of the people who came said that for them, amalgamation wasn't working and something has to change. Do we know what, if anything, the government thinks about this? Do we know what, if anything, the government has to say to the people who came and said they feel remote even from their municipal government? They feel uninvolved. They feel that they're not heard. They feel that they don't have enough influence. They feel that it's not a sufficiently democratic process at City Hall, and they are worried. And they look back and they blame amalgamation. Well, Mr. Speaker, again, this wasn't a series of speakers that we looked for or put up. These are speakers who simply appeared, many of them saying that they lived in the town of Bedford, former town of Bedford. And they came and really said that they were having a problem. But people from other parts of the municipality said the same thing. But we don't know what the government thinks about it. Well, those are suggestions, those are observations, those are problems, but none of them is a problem with HRM or HRM Council. All of these are problems that have to do with the failure of the government to engage properly in the law reform process that it is supposedly engaged with here. It's the failures of the government that I'm identifying, because we support this bill, we'll vote for it, but I have to say that when it comes to an understanding of municipal government, when it comes to an understanding of Metro, that government is not very far advanced. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Halifax-Tyndale, Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to rise here again and to speak to Bill 79. 179?
179.
179. Anyway, I wanted to say a few words in support of Bill 179. We do support strongly, as you've heard, Mr. Speaker, from this side of the House, the idea of a separate charter for the Halifax Regional Municipality. We want for the Halifax Regional Municipality what all municipalities, municipal units would like. The right to self-determination, the ability to respond to local conditions and local aspirations. We want the same rights that we ourselves demanded 250 years ago, the right to a representative and responsive government. And for a government to be representative and responsive, it should have the right and the tools to respond to its local populations. The idea of a charter, Mr. Speaker, is not new to Halifax. Halifax has had a charter for, I believe, over 250 years. And Halifax has had its charter for over 250 years, Mr. Speaker. It had a charter on amalgamation. So this is nothing new, Mr. Speaker. It restores a power that Halifax once had. Halifax, as you know, and as the bill acknowledges, Mr. Speaker, it's the capital of Nova Scotia. It's the seat of government. It plays an important role in supporting the well-being of this province and this region. It's the largest municipality in Atlantic Canada. It's the region's centre of business and government. And it's no surprise that Halifax wants and should get its own charter. And this bill gives the local council a broad authority to pass laws respecting the right to govern the municipality in whatever way the elected council considers appropriate. So we have no problem with that bill, those aspects of the bill. Nor do we have a problem with the framework which aims to devise a more efficient and clear process, a more transparency, more meaningful consultation, the right to be notified, the right to be heard, and all of those things that come with a charter and with democratic rights. Whether or not those rights are provided for in Bill 179 is not clear, Mr. Speaker. Certainly, in the section that we were the sections that we were looking at earlier, particularly Section 255(3)L, the debate that we had over the external appearance of structure, for example. To me, it's not so much a question of that particular provision, but how the public has perceived that provision. It essentially says that we're not sure that this section means what it's supposed to mean. We tried to limit it so that it would be clear, and that was rejected. But the debate over clarity, the debate over that section, Mr. Speaker, really speaks to the lack of trust that the public has in our democratic institutions, in our non-elected processes. And that's not to say that there's anything wrong with the staff at HRM, that there's anything wrong with the site-based planning committee that must be struck. But it does says that the public is not sure about the competence or the trustworthiness of the council. And so even though we are giving this new agency the authority to do it, there is still that question of trust, and part of the challenge will have to be building that trust. And I hope that when the Halifax Regional Municipality tells us that this provision does not apply to mass or scale or height, that we can believe them, and it will not be used as a backdoor to getting into these types of issues. And it's not so much that we don't trust them, but we also believe that in those things that are so fundamental, that make significant changes to height and mass, and things that the public has made it very clear that wants to be consulted on, that this process will not be used as a way to get around that. And so we trust the government at this stage, and we trust the municipality when it says that height and mass and those fundamental things will not be affected in any significant way by this bill, and that the public will have a right to be involved, that the council will have a right to be involved, and perhaps even the Utility and Review Board. And one more thing, Mr. Speaker, this bill, the people defending it have made great heroic claims about what this bill is going to do for Halifax. We have to be a little bit realistic, Mr. Speaker, that the problems of Halifax that the city is encountering does not lie in whether or not Halifax has its own charter. The problem lies in more fundamental problems that we are having with demographics and with the economy. And if we are to develop downtown, we're going to have to do more than pass charters and debate these clauses in terms of whether or not we trust our institutions or not. With that, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say again that we support wholeheartedly this idea of a charter that gives the Halifax Regional Municipality its own autonomy. We respect and we applaud the attempt to develop more transparency and accountability and the right to be heard, at least the claims that have been made about that. and we respect the notion that there will at some point be another bill that will talk about specifics about what it means. And when that bill comes up, we'll be happy to speak some more about it. For the moment, Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to support Bill 179. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The honourable member from Halifax, Citadel, Sable Island.
Before I take my seat, I'd like to acknowledge the presence in the gallery of my new constituents who are away from their home base, and also some of them who are at their home base a few doors down from me on Walnut Street. I would welcome Monsieur Bourgeois and his group of students to our house, and I would like them to rise and receive the warm welcome from the University of St. Anne.
Bienvenue à nos invités. The honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Speaker. It's a pleasure to say a few words on Bill number 179, the Halifax Regional Municipal Charter. And je vais aussi prendre cette occasion de remercier nos visiteurs qui sont venus nous voir ici à l'Assemblée. On est couramment en train de faire la troisième lecture sur le projet de loi qui va donner une charte à la municipalité ici à Halifax. Alors, c'est ça la discussion qui prend place. Une fois que j'aurai fini de parler, j'espère que c'est le ministre qui va finir le débat et là, il y aura un vote et puis là, le projet de loi sera passé à ce point-là. Alors, c'est ça la discussion qui prend place. Et puis, j'avais quelques remarques que je voulais faire après écouter quelques des membres de NPD. Mr. Speaker, I just wanted to speak very briefly because I thought it interesting listening to the member from Halifax Shabukto and the member from Halifax Citadel Sable Island preach a little bit to us here in this House. And the member from Halifax Citadel went on at length about the amendment proposed by the member from Cole Harbour Eastern Passage and how it was not supported by the two other parties, and yet they both went on to say how they respected Halifax, they respected the Charter. And I thought it quite ironic because one would expect if you respected the Charter and respected Halifax Regional Municipality, any amendments that you'd want to bring, that you'd actually get their support for it. And you'd say, look, I've gone and I've talked to them, I've told them, here's what my concern is, here's what I believe will make this bill stronger, and I'd like your support. Yet that didn't take place, Mr. Speaker. And yet they'll tell us on one end, they support Halifax Regional Municipality, their independence, everything else, yet the NDP are going to tell us what's good for HRM, and they're going to fix the bill without even seeking the support of the Council. And I think that speaks volumes, and I think that speaks to the reason why it did not receive support here in this House. The other interesting point, and it took them a while to get there, and I think deep down it takes them a little bit to admit it, because when you lift the veil, you see a number of things about the NDP that aren't quite readily apparent, but you finally heard it when the mayor from Halifax Citadel said it's time for 2 more seats here in Metro. So there's 2 options to do that, Mr. Speaker. Either it means the NDP want more members in this House, which I'd be interested to see how Nova Scotians would react to that, or they're going to take seats away from other parts of Nova Scotia, which, Mr. Speaker, I believe speaks to the NDP's true mandate here in this House. It is to take away representation from Nova Scotians outside of the city and pit one part of Nova Scotia against another part of Nova Scotia. And, Mr. Speaker, that's not what Nova Scotians expect. In regards to where you live in this province, you should have the representation that you're owed. And the question being, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure you have the same question, would the mayor from Halifax Citadel and is the NDP party suggesting that we abandon the protected ridings that minorities have fought for years to get in this province? Is that what they wish to abandon? Do they wish to get away of the protected status offered to African Nova Scotians through the Preston riding? Do they wish to abandon the rights given to the Acadians in Clare, Argyll, and Richmond? Is that where they're going to take the seats away to put here in HRM? So, Mr. Speaker, that is the question to be asked. That is the answer that was not provided from the mayor from Halifax Citadel, but that is the question that we'll certainly be bringing back to our constituents and letting them know what the true mandate of the NDP is, should they ever be given the opportunity to govern this province. And Nova Scotians have a right to know that. So, Mr. Speaker, those are the brief comments that I wanted to make on this. I believe our caucus has shown our support for HRM. We believe this bill is going to make the city stronger and going to make it quite clear as how they operate from here forward. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to see 3rd reading of Bill number 179.
Thank you. I recognize the Minister will be to close debate on third reading. The Honourable, the Minister, Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to make a couple comments before closing debate on Bill 179, third reading. I want to thank the members on the other side of the House, for the most part, for their helpful and supportive comments. I do say I would have to join with the member from Richmond in taking rather serious exception to some of the comments from Halifax Shabukto about taking seats away from rural Nova Scotia to give them to HRM. But then on the other hand, we do know that basically kind of an HRM party in many ways, and that they really don't get out into the rural areas, with the exception of my good friend from Cape Breton Centre. Mr. Speaker, this is an important piece of legislation, and it is one that, as you know, has taken 2 sessions to get it to this point. It is supported by the UNSM and other municipalities. It will give Halifax, we believe, some tools it needs to progress and to be the capital city that it is of Nova Scotia and indeed of Atlantic Canada. Mr. Speaker, this is legislation that actually, if you looked at how the 3 parties worked to try and get this to the point it is, with the exception of a couple people, we did work fairly well in getting this to this point. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm delighted to see this, and I'm really delighted as well to move third reading of Bill number 179, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter, and ask you to call the question.
Thank you. The motion is for third reading on Bill number 179, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. Is the House ready for the question? Would all those in favour of the motion please say aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion carried.
Bill 179, title and act respecting the Halifax Regional Municipality.
Order that the bill do pass, or that the title be as read by the clerk, in order that the bill be engrossed. On an introduction, the honourable member from Waverley Fall River Beaverbank.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to bring the House's attention to the West Gallery. In the West Gallery this evening, we have seated a gentleman by the name of Brian Tapper. Brian Tapper is a vocational counselor with the Nova Scotia Rehab. I've known Brian since my early years at Dalhousie University, and Brian is also a neighbor of mine at the season ticket holder with the Halifax Mooseheads. And I would ask the House to give Brian a warm welcome.
The Honourable, the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you please call Bill number 181, the HRM by design?
Bill number 181, the Honourable, the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia and Municipal Relations.
Well, thank you very much, Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise again to speak on Bill 181, which is effectively an amendment to the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. And to clarify, these amendments to the Act allow the implementation of the HRM by Design initiative. Mr. Speaker, the HRM by Design initiative has been underway for a couple of years and has been discussed in numerous public meetings. This initiative is designed to, and I quote from HRM, to establish a clear and compelling vision of our city for the next 25 years. The HRM by Design process will provide clarity for proposed developments and provide the framework for the future. Mr. Speaker, what it essentially does is ask the citizens of the municipality to determine the vision for downtown, and with the assistance from professionals, the rules of what the rules for downtown development should be. HRM by Design does this by dividing the downtown into precincts. It then establishes, through extensive public discussions, what types of developments will be permitted in each precinct, what building heights will be allowed, and guidelines relating to what the proposed buildings should look like. I believe that HRM is to be congratulated for initiating this process, for wanting to provide a clear planning framework and to move away from some of the issues we've seen in the past concerning downtown development. Mr. Speaker, the province is committed to making sure that we have a vibrant, prosperous downtown that attracts and promotes development. And as the capital, we can have a city all Nova Scotians can be proud of. The province has made this legislation a priority. HRM is our capital, and its economic growth affects the province as a whole. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is of keen interest to all Nova Scotians. However, Mr. Speaker, there's been some confusion of late around this legislation, and I'd like to address some of the questions that have been raised. First, Mr. Speaker, HRM by design does not automatically change the rules for downtown development. What it does is simply provide council with more planning tools to help put into place the vision that the municipality has developed and proposed. The HRM design process requires some changes in legislation in order to make it work. Second, Mr. Speaker, we are often asked, why are we changing the legislation now? Well, Mr. Speaker, HRM Council will be holding hearings and planning matters in February through, again, a public process. And HRM has asked for these changes so that the discussions in February will be based on authority and planning tools that are already in place, instead of what might be available in the future. In essence, it's really that simple, Mr. Speaker. HRM needs tools to have valid discussions and to move forward. Now, Halifax Regional Municipality is not the first jurisdiction to go through a process like this. In fact, Vancouver currently has a progressive planning initiative underway. Mr. Speaker, in order to give the members of the House a better understanding of what I mean when I speak about the planning tools included in HRM by design, let me give you an example. Mr. Speaker, part of this legislation will enable HRM Council to appoint a design review committee. The design committee will review aspects like architectural design and other characteristics of new development in downtown. We are have brought to the House a change that has allowed the Design Review Committee 60 days to look at the proposal instead of 30. Mr. Speaker, as you are well aware, law amendments saw a number of people speak about this legislation. And indeed, there are a wide range of opinions, but regardless of their point of view, all of the presenters were very passionate about the downtown core. And as a result of these presentations, and after discussions with the members opposite, there were additional amendments brought forward. For example, Mr. Speaker, the section of legislations that apply to the Halifax Peninsula applied to the Halifax Peninsula were reduced. That included sections relating to architectural controls and site plans and variances, as well as bonus zoning. In addition, the legislation now requires HRM to establish sessions open for public consultations on site plans in that defined area, and indeed that entire plan will be reviewed within a 10-year framework. And that provision, Mr. Speaker, provides for additional and ongoing opportunities for public input. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, the amendments that were made will result in more certainty for citizens, the development industry, the heritage community, and the municipal council. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to thank all members of this House for recognizing the importance of this legislation and for giving their support. And I now move third reading of Bill number 181.
Thank you. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased this evening to be, almost this evening, I guess, 5:03, this evening to be able to rise to speak to Bill 181. And for the record, perhaps I can encourage the honourable members from the Liberal caucus to make sure they pay attention to this. This is Bill number 181, an act to implement HRM by design. Perhaps you can tell your colleagues when she comes in that in fact the information is there before us. The the intent of this bill, Mr. Speaker, is to be enabling our Halifax regional municipality to do the job that they have set out to do, to facilitate the urban design study that has been a goal and a strategic element offshoot from the regional plan, affecting primarily certainly HRM's regional centre. This legislation for HRM by design. Mr. Speaker, the downtown Halifax area of HRM is the economic, social and cultural hub of the region. But what happens here affects all of Nova Scotia, Mr. Speaker. What happens here is important to all of Nova Scotia. So it's important that we get this right. I don't know, I can't tell you 100% if we got all elements of it right at this point, but I think it's time to move it forward and test the waters with it. Once again, HRM by design, once it's enacted, will allow Halifax Regional Municipality to proceed with the job that they've been tasked to do, but the job is really just beginning at this stage. As of this moment, Halifax Regional Municipality does not have the legislative authority to proceed. They do not. They cannot proceed with the public hearings on the rest of the HRM by design without this legislation. So that is the key, I think, one of the key focuses of allowing this to go forward at this stage, recognizing that there is still work that potentially, well, I know has to be done on these issues surrounding development and the future of the downtown area. A key objective, Mr. Speaker, of the HRM by design was to find the right balance between new growth and development, yet the protection of our heritage. However, I think it's worth noting here that's an element that is missing. Bill 182 that has not been brought forward. Halifax Regional Municipality has yet again requested that this government bring that bill forward. It's a piece. They came with all three requests. It's a piece that is missing. It is a further protection for the heritage element of the downtown area, and in fact of all of the heritage properties across the province. So it's an important element. I think it needs to be brought forward, and it's missing. It's been suggested that there were other parties that held this up, but clearly the delay is lies squarely with our government to bring that forward. The process, though, on HRM by design has been lengthy. It's been 2 years. It's not been without controversy, but I don't think any good government, any good governing policies would be the ones to go forward without really good dialogue, perhaps differing of opinions. We need that to get a really good, strong understanding of what the needs of our municipalities and of our citizens are. After 2 years of public consultation, and by and large that was successful consultation, I believe there was good quality engagement by citizens. The public engagement strategy, though, is a complicated one, and it's one that needs work, I think, in most municipal units. I remember when I was on council, one of the very first elements of consultation that I experienced was some of the shortchanged elements around the Harbour Solutions project. And while I was there, we talked on council a number of times. I know my colleagues who were in the House that were on council with me at the time, we talked about the need for that to be strengthened. The need for that to be improved. And I know that HRM is coming forward with more reports and consideration around what is the best route in their planning applications for consultation, whether it be a large-scale project such as Harbour Solutions or HRM by design, or just the ones that would be at their local community councils. So I think that's an important element that will be coming forward from them. Public support for HRM by design, by and large, is out there, I believe. this bill is not, I think it's important to note this bill is not an endorsement of the details of HRM by design. Having said that, there's, a lot of it in that's really good, but HRM needs to now step up to the plate and finalize this deal. They have another element of the work to be done. And that's through their next stage of public hearing, through their next stage of, again, some more public consultation, which they hope will move forward in the early year of 2009. But of course, today we have a role to play. This bill, this legislation, this enabling legislation is here before us, and we have to make judgment on whether or not we're prepared to see this go forward. Mr. Speaker, I believe that HRM Council and staff and all those involved in this design strategy have a huge challenge ahead of them. But what our role in it is to get this right. What's been presented to us, again, what came before us in the House at first presentation, I don't believe was right. We had concerns about it, and so we worked hard to have dialogue with staff, have dialogue with our Service Nova Scotia staff, our caucus, with HRM staff, with the citizens of the community. Certainly the roughly 32 presenters in law amendments. They were, as the minister had spoke, they spoke passionately, they spoke thoughtfully, they came in, they shared their information, and it was all information that we had to take very, very seriously. But HRM by design, HRM charter, and certainly the Heritage Act, they all overlap. That those presentations were really addressing much of the same information, but specifically HRM by design. Now we are here, and I have to applaud, I want to applaud, take the time to recognize the valiant efforts, I believe, of Mr. Phil Pacey and the Heritage Trust for fulfilling really the mandate of the goals that he and Phil and that trust has been set out to do on so many occasions. They took great time, great pains, great effort to bring their issues before us, and no doubt before the government. We were able to bring some of the amendments, some of the changes through, not all. I wouldn't say we certainly achieved. I think we fell quite short of some of the goals that they had hoped to get through. But they worked very hard on behalf of the citizens of Halifax, and I think they need to be applauded and congratulated for those efforts. We felt there needed to be changes from the original recommendations on this legislation, and so we worked hard. And one of those was around public information, Mr. Speaker, and the minister referenced that. But we're going to take credit where credit is due. We brought that forward. We know that that's important to citizens, and I thank the minister and the Liberal caucus for agreeing to having that change. As well, the realization that this bill, as presented originally, encapsulated the whole of the peninsula. That baffled us. That baffled HRM staff. That baffled council. Where did that come from? The consultation, the meetings that we've spoke about over the last 2 years were relative to the downtown area. That's what people in our communities came out to speak about. That's what the staff were recommending on. That's what council was voting on and will proceed to vote on. Somewhere along the lines, the government decided to throw in the whole peninsula. So we believe that it's right and it's fair and it's just to bring that back to the attention of the downtown area, recognizing, though, that HRM council has the intention at a later date to look at this type of design for the entire peninsula and Dartmouth. But that's for then. This is around the downtown area, and that's what and again, I'm thankful for the parties that agreed to the amendment as we put forward to bring it back to where it was meant to be. Again, there are still some unresolved issues for some members of our caucus, and I know that they'll speak to that. The public, however, I am prepared I believe I'm prepared to see this go forward on their behalf. Before I take my seat, though, I really do have to encourage council the representatives that have been elected into that position to do due diligence as they go forward with this design strategy, to bring forward thoughtful consideration as they proceed through their public hearings of the issues that they're tasked to address. Again, I asked them to do the true community and engagement process through, but I have faith in them, Mr. Speaker. I have faith in their council. I have faith in the representatives that are there and elected to do the job that they're doing and to put the interests of the public first and foremost in their consideration and decision-making time, as we have in our deliberations. I'm prepared to support Bill 181 to enact to implement HRM by design, Mr. Speaker, but before I do, I as well believe it's time to congratulate HRM Council, the staff of HRM, the HRM by Design Committee, the residents and stakeholders who have taken the time on a number of occasions, too numerous to mention, all of them, to come out and share what's important to them, to the decision makers that are making decisions, exercising their democratic rights, Mr. Speaker, to be engaged in this process. I thank them. It's an important process. Don't stop doing that. We as decision makers cannot do a good job without their help. And again, it's that this really is only one step in the next, really the load really is now with council if this should pass. I wish them well. And with that, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
The Honourable, the member for Halifax Shabukto.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I have been following the debate around the clutch of municipal government bills that the government has offered to us since the spring with great interest. One bill was 138, that was a fairly flawed bill and had to be severely amended before it went through in the spring session. The government then chose to defer the three other bills that it introduced, 179, 181, and 182, which were, I note, requested by HRM Council as a package. And as my colleague has just said, we have to ask ourselves, where's the third bill? Where's Bill 182? But we're focused at the moment on 181. I shall not be voting in favor of this bill, and I want to take a few minutes to explain why. In discussing Bill 179 a minute ago, I said that one of the main obligations of any level of government is to try to build community. It's to try to promote the democratic institutions and the feel of democracy that is out there in our communities. So by that test, I look at Bill 181 and I ask myself, does this promote democracy, or in fact, does it inhibit democracy? And I think about the comments of Alexis de Tocqueville, who was the Frenchman who came to the United States in the 1830s and wrote a book called Democracy in America. De Tocqueville was intrigued by this young and dynamic country that had just been established through the process of revolution similar to the French Revolution on the North American continent. And he traveled around and he looked at all communities in North America to test the idea of democracy. And here's what he said about democracy at the municipal level. He said that democracy at the municipal level is kind of like grade school compared with post-secondary education, or he probably used higher levels of education. He wouldn't have said post-secondary education. Democracy at the municipal level, he said, is where we learn democracy. Our involvement at the municipal level as citizens is where we learn to be good citizens and where we build the democracy at the higher level, at the state and national level in the United States, at the provincial and national level in Canada. And he said that if a democracy, if a great nation does not have the hallmarks of democracy at the local level, then its citizens won't get the opportunity to learn democracy effectively and to grow, and their communities will not grow, and that will redound negatively in terms of how the nation will evolve in its entirety. So I bear in mind that historical example when I ask myself whether Bill 181 does anything to build democracy. And the impulse to democracy in Metro is enormous. There are community groups out there that work hard. There are community groups that follow land use planning issues in the community in detail. And they go to meeting after meeting after meeting. Everyone who has been involved in the detailed, grind-it-through land use planning issues, as so many of us have in this chamber through our direct experience as elected officials at that level, know that this can be a long process that requires a lot of attention. It's a process that's very hard on volunteer citizens who come forward, and yet they keep coming forward in their numbers because they want to be involved. And you know what? The essence of land use planning is not that it's a subject for experts and specialists. If we believed that, we would just take the planners who get planning degrees and put them in a room and say, you figure it out and tell us later what you've come up with. We don't do that. And we don't do it because we know, for exactly the reasons that de Tocqueville suggested, that there's a better way. I have come definitely to the conclusion that land use planning decisions are always improved by going through a public process. You get information from people who live in the communities and really know it, even when they're interacting and talking to the traffic experts, to the land use experts, to the demographic experts, to the elected officials. They're the ones who live in the community, they're the ones who live in the neighborhoods, and they always know their community, and they come forward with very useful information inevitably. Those of us who have been at the municipal level and have gone through public hearings know that you always hear good stuff from the people in your community when you go to them and you say to them, here's what we're thinking of doing, give us your comments. We're open to hearing what you have to say. This is a transparent process. We're genuinely interested in listening to you. And you know how democracy gets built? It's not just that the decisions are better in terms of the quality. Democracy gets built because even when people don't, as a result of those processes, get exactly what they want, if they feel that they have definitely been heard, honestly heard, by a decision maker who is sincerely interested in listening to them, even if they decide something different, then they will go away prepared to accept the decision. They will go away prepared to integrate it and get on with their lives and continue to go on with the process. So that's another part of public hearings that's so crucial, is that people want to be heard. They don't want to guarantee that the result will always be what they're asking for. In a democracy with a plurality of views, everyone knows that it won't necessarily be that. But they want to know that they've been heard in an honest process. They want the opportunity to be heard. Let me just cut to the chase immediately and quote to you. I want to quote to you exactly what is wrong with this bill. A statement was given at the Law Amendments Committee by Professor Jill Grant, who holds a doctorate in planning and who is head of the planning school at Dalhousie University. And here is her statement about Bill 181. Bill 181, HRM by design, does not provide an adequate role for the public in considering applications for incentive or bonus zoning. It potentially places staff in difficult positions, making private agreements on behalf of the community with little in the way of public review. Deals reached behind closed doors with no public hearing or review may lead to allegations of unfairness. Given the ability of bonus zoning to enhance the value of property, the municipality needs a transparent and open system of checks and balances to ensure that decisions are seen to be in the best interests of the community. community groups should retain the right to appeal decisions to the UARB based on the congruence of the decision with planning policy and regulations. That's the end of the statement from Professor Jill Grant, who has not only taught for years the planners, but has also published a book and many articles on the importance of public participation in the planning process. Well, if Jill Grant says to us, Bill 181 does not provide an adequate role for the public, I'm inclined to believe her. And I didn't need her to tell me this because it was obvious to me when I read this bill, even acknowledging that the government has made some amendments to it, that this bill doesn't, in fact, build democracy. This bill, in fact, places barriers in the way of the effective participation of citizens at the ground level in looking at land use decisions. And the land use decisions are very important ones and too important to have this kind of interference put in place. Again, let me remind all members and the public that when we're discussing this bill, we're not discussing the details of the HRM by design process. We're not discussing whether buildings should be tall or short or in between in the downtown of Halifax. We're not discussing where they should be placed, which blocks should be developed. We're not discussing whether downtown Halifax should be, as they use in some of the language when the planners have discussed it, pedestrian friendly. I think that's a great idea. I don't like the heights, but I think the pedestrian friendly part is good. We're not discussing any of that here, though. None of that is up for discussion here on the floor of this legislature. It could be. We could decide to get engaged in that. But that's not, in fact, really what's in front of us. What's in front of us is a bill that, in fact, has to do with the legal tools that we are offering to the municipality to discuss what it wants to do about downtown Halifax. And I heard the minister say that HRM, and I think I'm quoting, needs these tools to make HRM by design work. Well, that's simply not the case. It is simply not the case. In the Municipal Government Act now, and in the new charter for HRM that we just passed a few minutes ago, and that all of us voted for, there are all the legal tools that are necessary to make the content of HRM by design go ahead if HRM Council ever gets to that point of deciding to go ahead with it. Because it still hasn't decided that. They're still working on it. Zoning deals with height, and that zoning power is right there in the HRM Charter right now. That's a power that exists. It's there. It's not missing. We haven't taken it out by passing the new HRM Charter. The power to deal with height, it's there. Furthermore, if HRM Council were on any particular piece of land in the downtown to say that they wanted to do something extraordinary that wasn't previously contemplated by the restrictions of the land use bylaw, they can do it by development agreement. That device was invented decades ago and is regularly used. A development agreement is a special contract between a landowner and the municipality. It allows the landowner, after public hearing, after thought and a vote by the council, to go ahead with a building where the design might be different, where the height might be different than normally contemplated. It's entirely possible. And furthermore, every significant development that has gone on in the downtown of Halifax went ahead through development agreements, certainly for the last 30 years. So what is this bill doing? If the minister's statement is not right, that HRM does not need, his word, need, if HRM does not need these tools to make HRM by design work, then what exactly is the thrust of the bill? I'll tell you the thrust of the bill. The thrust of the bill is to say, we don't want the public really to be involved as much as it's been involved before. The thrust of the bill is to say, when it comes time to looking at specific sites in the downtown of Halifax, we don't want to go through the trouble of having another public hearing, and we don't want to go through the possibility of an appeal to the Utility and Review Board. That's what this bill does. What this bill does is it invents some extraordinary land use planning law tools that are designed to minimize public input and to undercut, in my view, the democratic participation by all citizens. And it's wrong. And I won't vote for it. I think it's mistaken for the government to come and try and cloud the issue and try and say, as has been suggested, that if you don't like this bill, you don't like HRM by design, and you don't like development in the downtown, and you're anti-development. What a lot of nonsense. What a complete lot of nonsense. And I reject that, and I reject the members over there saying that. I know no one, certainly not the MLAs who represent the Halifax Peninsula, who don't want healthy economic development in the downtown of Halifax. You bet we do. And when there have been fights in the past about development and particular items, particular proposals, those fights have been about the scale of the project. Those fights have been about compatibility of the project with surrounding neighborhoods. Those fights have been about design. Those fights have been about views from Citadel Hill. Those fights have been about the wind effects on pedestrians walking around. And you know what? Every one of those are legitimate interests for debate at the detailed level in front of municipal councils, and that's the kind of thing that citizens want to be able to debate and argue about and have public hearings about and have the rights of appeal to the Utility and Review Board about. But this bill is designed to say, we don't want that anymore. We're not going to be bothered. And members of the government have tried to muddy the pools by suggesting that when I speak, when others speak, and they don't like this bill, they're opposed to development of the downtown. Nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. Let me tell you something about HRM by design, though. Mr. Speaker, it's gone off the rails. If I wanted an additional reason not to like this bill, I could look at what's actually happened at the municipal level. And I would have an additional reason for voting against it if, in fact, this bill really was necessary. If this bill really was necessary for HRM by design to go forward, that would give me an extra reason to vote against it. Because HRM really has, at the municipal level, gone off the rails. Do you remember where it came from? Several members have talked about the history of municipal planning here. Well, after amalgamation, HRM Council set out to do a very sensible thing to look at regional planning. They said all the pre-amalgamation entities had their municipal plans, but they need some coordination. Why don't we do some coordination? Well, that was 1996. I was there when we started off that process. It took a decade. 2006, finally a new regional plan was adopted. And the new regional plan, amongst its policies, said something quite good. Here's what it said. It said, you know what? Urban sprawl is not a good thing. We should have something of a more compact form. And we should encourage more development, residential and commercial development, in the central urban area. But you know what they defined as the central urban area? It was the whole of the Halifax Peninsula, and it was Dartmouth inside the circumferential highway. And they said, over the next 25 years, we're going to add about another 25,000 people in that central area, remembering that that's a big piece of territory. And here's something that spun off as a myth. Those 25,000 people that the regional plan talked about as being an appropriate target added population for the Halifax Peninsula, the whole of it, and Dartmouth within the circumferential boundary, people started talking as if all of those 25,000 people were supposed to be in the downtown of Halifax, the CBD. Not true. Was never true. And furthermore, HRM Council has never set targets for how many of those 25,000 people should be in the CBD. Hasn't gotten there yet. But that myth was spun out there. And some councillors even embraced that. And you saw it in print, and you heard it repeated. And it's just not true. And here's the next thing that HRM by Design did that was wrong. Initially, they started looking at our residential neighborhoods because they were looking at that big area. They were looking at my residential neighborhood, they were looking at Halifax Needham, they were looking at Dartmouth, and they did a little preliminary work. But then, all of a sudden, the process of HRM by Design wasn't about residential neighborhoods anymore. It was only about the Halifax downtown. And they said, you know what, we'll deal with neighborhoods next year or the year after. And you know why that was problematic? It was problematic not because the downtown of Halifax didn't need attention. It sure does. It needs attention. But it was problematic because it left the residential neighborhoods out there without effective policies to increase the number of families with children there. And when the development community has been building, they haven't been building homes for families with children. They've been building apartments for one person, two persons, three persons. And so the school board comes along and looks at the demographics. Remember this last year? The school board comes along and it says, where are the kids? We're going to start closing schools. Well, if the HRM by Design people had been doing their job, they would have found ways to increase the amount of housing for families with children, so we wouldn't be looking at the threat of closure of schools that we have over the last couple of years in both Halifax and Dartmouth. That was a very bad thing, and it was part of that problem was that HRM by Design went off the rails in that respect. So I hope the councillors at HRM are thinking about these points because they are desperately in need of close examination. Serious problems. Another myth that's floated around HRM by Design is that the problems with actual development in the downtown of Halifax have to do with the legal tools, that they have something to do with a flawed legal process around development. But you know what? They don't. What they have to do with is the economics of the situation. If you look at what's been built in downtown Halifax over the last couple of decades, you'll find that a lot of hotels have been built. You'll find that residential projects have been built. And you'll find that HRM Council has in fact authorized a whole series of residential projects for the downtown that are substantial in size, but for which not a shovel has been put in the ground. And the problem hasn't been the legal framework, the problem has been the economics of the situation. If developers really thought that there was a huge demand for office space in the downtown, as we hear from the government, as we hear from Nova Scotia Business Inc., as we hear from some others, they would have built it. They would have built it, or they would have asked, instead of for residential projects, they would have asked for commercial projects. They could have done that through development agreements, but they didn't. So either they have quite a different understanding of what the office space demand is for the downtown, or they understand the dollar problems of building Class A space. What they're telling us is that they think it's too expensive for them to build Class A space on some of this land, and it won't be taken up because there's competition from other space. And you only have to go back to look at how the downtown is developed with something like Scotia Square at one end and the Maritime Mall at the other end of Barrington Street to realize that those two structures, built 30 years ago, took up a huge amount of the future opportunity for offices to be built in the downtown, and they've sat on that. Those two buildings have sat on the possibility of other office space being built in the downtown because of their enormous size for 3 decades. That's the story. That's the hard reality. The problem isn't the legal framework. That's a myth. During law amendments, people referred to the one comprehensive study that's been done cross-Canada-wide of appeals. Because there's always been a suggestion, and we heard it from the government in the spring when they brought forth Bill 138, there's always been a suggestion that somehow the planning process for the downtown takes too long. Well, you know what? The government dealt with that in the spring. The government came and said, everything takes too long at the Utility and Review Board, we need to introduce time limits. Well, you know what? We did. We passed that bill. We passed it. We've shortened up the time limits at the Utility and Review Board. If that was the problem, that's been dealt with 6 months ago. It's all done. Now, the real problem from the perspective of those who want this bill is they just don't want to be bothered with these hallmarks of democracy. They just don't want to be bothered with the opportunity to have these public hearings. Mr. Speaker, I want to identify what I think is a particularly irritating flaw with this bill.
Order, please. The chatter is getting a little high. The honourable member has the floor.
The particularly irritating flaw with this bill is that it wishes to favor property owners over tenants. In the year in which we're celebrating 250 years of democracy, in the year in which we thought we had reminded ourselves that 200 years ago we moved beyond special status for those with property as over against the rest of the population, we now find this reasserting itself in the middle of this bill. Because make no mistake, this bill disenfranchises tenants and gives special rights to property owners. What it says is, when it comes to notification of certain kinds of developments, the notification within a very small area will go only to property owners in that area. Now imagine, even when this is confined to the downtown of Halifax, we know that there are residents there who are not property owners. Lots of them are tenants. And we also know that when it comes to land use planning, that the interests of those who are tenants are not necessarily coextensive with those who are property owners. Property owners, the person who owns the apartment building, may get notice of something that's proposed in a next-door lot. And they might think it's just fine, the owner of that apartment building, because they might think that if a new building is built there, it'll add to the value of their own piece of land. But what about the tenants in his building? They're not entitled to notice under this legislation, even though they may be within the same notification area. And their interest is going to be a different interest. Their interest is going to be in the quality of life in their neighborhood. And they may not like that development, and they want the opportunity to say so, and this bill says they won't get that opportunity. Not only won't there be a public hearing, they won't even have been told about it in the first place, and that's what that minister thinks promotes democracy in this province in the year D250. I don't think so. And let me tell you something else about it. It's not just that I find this particular provision to be obnoxious. I'm going to suggest to the government that it's illegal. I'm going to suggest to the government that when they favor property owners so flagrantly over non-property owners, they're going to run into a charter challenge. And I don't think they've thought about that. At some point, Section 15 of the Charter is going to be used in exactly these circumstances. And I've been watching litigation go on around the country in which Section 15 begins to engage with the issue of discrimination against those who have less economic means than others. And it's advancing. That litigation is advancing. And it may be that this bill will be the one that'll end up going to court, and we'll see whether this, in fact, gets knocked out on that basis. Finally, Mr. Speaker, let me issue a warning to the government. If they think that they are inventing a more expeditious process for land use development in the downtown of Halifax, they might be wrong. And here's why I say that. They're knocking out the Utility and Review Board as an appellate body. In the 10 Canadian provinces, 9 of them have provincial-wide land use appellate bodies that exercise supervisory jurisdiction of some sort over municipalities' land use decisions. There's one province that does not have such a land use appellate body, and that is British Columbia. So what happens in British Columbia, where citizens can go, they can still go to public hearings at their municipal council, but what happens in British Columbia when citizens find that a decision has been made that they think is inappropriate and there's no land use appellate body? Well, you know what they do? They go to court. In the province of British Columbia, there is more per capita litigation over land use development projects than there is anywhere else, precisely because there is no land use appellate body. And if the government thinks that by passing this bill, it is going to offer to the municipality a tool that will expedite the process by cutting out the Utility and Review Board, they're going to find something very different. What they're going to find is that there's going to be increased litigation, which is going to take a heck of a lot longer to sort out than appeals at the Utility and Review Board. And the government had better be prepared for that, and they had better be prepared to wear it. Mr. Speaker, I don't like this bill. To use some of the, I know the government has made some amendments to it, but they're minor amendments. And I won't vote in favor of it. Thank you very much.
The Honourable, the member for Halifax Citadel, Sable Island.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise here on third reading and to speak to Bill number 181, an act to implement HRM by design. But before I speak on that, Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about the HRM by design process. It's been a lengthy process. It's gone on now for over a year, and I've been intimately involved in the hearings. I participated in the debates. I've read the literature. I've spoken behind the scenes with some of the leading players in that process. And I want to pay tribute, Mr. Speaker, before I go too far into this, to Dale Godso and her HRM by Design team, and some of the other principals in this committee, Paul McKinnon, Don Sloan, Bernard Smith, Andy Fillmore, a number of people who've been very active in this discussion and whose opinions I respect and admire. And I certainly admire the energy that they have devoted to this process. If there's one thing I learned, Mr. Speaker, in the HRM by design process, it is that Haligonians care passionately about their city, about their built environment, and about its future. People came out in the hundreds to participate. There were heated debates in the corridors. There were heated debates in the newspaper. And in that process of talking with the principals in the HRM by Design project and following that debate, I learned a great deal. From that, Mr. Speaker, from that debate, there emerged a number of principles and objectives that are worth repeating. Okay. I think there was a consensus reached that Halifax downtown is the economic, social, and cultural heart of this region and must be treated as such. And to be treated as such, it had to have a built environment, it had to have a population, it had to have an economy befitting a capital district. we came to a consensus that Halifax does need more people, that we need to repopulate this heartland, if I can call it that, so that people can live near the city, that the quality of life in the city for those people who live here will be enhanced, that they have to live near where they work and go to school. It means that we have to protect the integrity of our neighborhoods, and that means we have to plan and design them. Okay? We need a beautiful and exciting city that will revitalize our region and attract our youth, especially skilled youth. Mr. Speaker, this city is a magnet for university students and other skilled professionals and people who come here because of the quality of life here, because of the water, because of the population that we have here, the welcoming atmosphere, the quality of jobs that are available, and we have to design a city that will attract those people here and keep them here. We reached a consensus that we have to do more to protect our heritage and to enhance our heritage. And not just heritage buildings, Mr. Speaker, but heritage spaces of our viewplanes. That we have to have clarity and predictability and timeliness to the development approval process. That we have to have enhanced public transit and active transportation. It's one thing we haven't seen much in this HRM by design, but we've been promised that this will be there later. But by and large, Mr. Speaker, I think on both sides of the debate, if we can characterize it as this debate is having two sides, there was a consensus that the status quo is not acceptable. You know, people are frustrated with the endless debate and legal wrangling. And so to the extent that this process, the HRM by design process, not necessarily this legislation, promises to end this legal wrangling and meet those other values and objectives, I would support that. Okay? But regardless of whether I would support that or not, Mr. Speaker, those values and those assets and those debates belong properly in Halifax Regional Council and in the municipality itself. The MLAs from the Halifax Peninsula in particular have participated actively in the life of the Halifax Council and the life of the city. And we reserve the right to continue to participate as actively as possible, as actively as our citizens require us to engage in those debates. The HRM by design process does not preclude that. What we have in front of us does not speak to the values and assets that HRM citizens and certainly citizens of downtown Halifax want. That debate is going to continue. This bill will launch the beginning of that next round of debate and will have to be approved by Council itself. And I dare say, Mr. Speaker, for all the planning that has gone into this process, for all the participation that has gone into the process, for all the claims that this process is going to bring some kind of stability and unity and integration in our planning process, there are some extraordinary inconsistencies in what's happening in theory and in practice in Halifax City, Mr. Speaker. For example, there's a meeting going on as we speak in my community at St. Mary's Elementary School. Just as the city, at the very moment that the city is saying it wants to attract 5,000 people downtown and 25,000 people onto the peninsula, it is proposing, not the city proper, but the school board is proposing to close St. Mary's School. Now, where's the consistency there, where community schools are the heart of the neighborhood? People come to, families come to live around community schools, businesses establish around there, public spaces are created around there, and we say on one hand we're going to attract people into downtown, and on the other hand we're saying we're going to close the school. There's a proposal to build a third bridge across the harbor or a tunnel, and build it right smack to the middle of the constituency, Mr. Speaker. 6 lanes of traffic, when the public has clearly said it wants better transit, it wants better transportation, it wants to reduce the number of cars that are coming into the downtown. And so we have this inconsistency where the theory says one thing and the practice is completely different. We say that we want to make Halifax the cultural hub of the province and of the region. and we closed down places like the Bloomfield Centre and the Khyber, and we cut our support to our young artists, and we closed down incubation spaces for them. We say we want to protect heritage, and yet we've been sitting on the Barrington Street Heritage Plan for years and years, and nothing has happened. We have a plan to develop the infirmary lands at Queen Street, where there was a widespread consensus. And this urban design plan has set that process back. And it set that process back in large part because of the intransigence of the government and the inability of the provincial government to cooperate with the municipal government on these kinds of issues. So this HRM by design plan, Mr. Speaker, even though I applaud it in theory and I respect the process and I admire the energy that Council and the HRM by design task force is devoted to it, has some pretty significant gaps between the rhetoric and the reality. And I hope that as we engage in this debate at the council level and at the municipal level, that some of these gaps will be closed, and some of those gaps in communication between the provincial and the municipal government will be closed, so that the provincial government will participate in this process as a constructive partner and not just deign on high when it suits its purposes to intervene in local decisions. We're passing a bill here, Mr. Speaker, that gives local autonomy to councils, yet the practice of the government has been to intervene in the legitimately made decisions of that council. But I want to say something, Mr. Speaker, about the bill itself and what this bill does and is supposed to do. There are a number of things, Mr. Speaker, that I have a problem with. I agree in principle with all of those things that we've talked about. But there are some clauses in there that are still a great source for confusion. And I sat through the debates at law amendments. I followed the public debate very carefully, and there's still a great deal of confusion about bonus zoning, for example, and variances, and the role of community councils and development officers. There's a great deal of difference of opinion about what constitutes a substantive matter and a non-substantive matter. There's a great deal of debate about the external appearances of structures and what constitutes a change to the external appearance. And so those are issues that need to be cleared up, Mr. Speaker, and are not completely clear in this legislation. And closely related to those is the role of the public, the role of the council, the role of the design review committee, the role of the development officer in making authoritative decisions, and what kinds of appeals there will be in that process. To me, Mr. Speaker, those are two pretty significant gaps in the legislation that need to be cleared up. So to the extent that these gaps are not cleared out, we certainly need to decide whether or not we're going to consider this now in this legislation, or we're going to consider this in the light of experience, whether or not these things can and should be cleared up at the council level or not. There are other gaps in this legislation, Mr. Speaker, that have been addressed to some extent in the amendment process. The boundaries of downtown and the capital district are clear. There was a question about whether or not this would apply to adjacent neighborhoods, and it's clear that it will not at this stage, although HRM by design will as time goes on. There is an extension of the boundaries within which people will be notified to 60 meters. There is a provision for additional public consultation and early warning for the public when issues relating to bonus zoning and amendments to external structures has been carried out. So this bill, in part, has been amended significantly, in part, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, HRM by design is a work in progress. And it's a work and as an indication that it is a work in progress, we've established not a sunset clause, but a review, that it'll be reviewed in 10 years. Based on what I've seen from the debates over the last couple of weeks, Mr. Speaker, I think we'll be reviewing it on a daily basis, and the review will begin the day this bill passes. So, Mr. Speaker, then this bill, to me, has, some pretty significant benefits. This bill has addresses, in part, the need for clarity or more clarity. It has sections dealing with site-based planning, and I like the idea of site-based planning, Mr. Speaker. I like the idea that when we plan for a site, that some of those things will be fixed. Now, we are assured that the height and mass of the building will be fixed in this site-based planning and will not be changed through bonus or incentive zoning, except to the extent that the bonus might provide for some additional height. But we're told that those will be fixed. We're told that the external appearance will not be changed in any substantive way. Now, we are expected to believe the government when it tells us that that's what this means. But Council in itself has very strongly said that it supports that interpretation, that development officers, that site-based planning committees, that others will not be able to vary that those kinds of fundamental limits that are put on that. So this debate, Mr. Speaker, these areas, or this lack of clarity, will have to be cleared up in the coming process. This lack of clarity will have to be cleared up in the debate at Council. And I trust the judgment of Council. I admire the Council for taking on this issue and trying